for coming, Leigh. This is now the 5th episode of the Scooter Space podcast. Obviously, what we'll be doing today, Leigh, is going through your chosen topic, which is what does a recession and tightening budgets mean for InfoSec in 2023? But obviously, before we get into it, do you just want to give us sort of a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I'm Leigh Hall. I'm the head of information security, architecture, delivery, and governance, risk and compliance for Flutter UK and Ireland. Possibly the longest job title in
It's a bit of a
history.
mouthful.
So the GRC bit was added to my role in January. I've picked up the governance assurance, risk and compliance, technical compliance teams across the UK and Ireland division to go with the work that my guys are already doing in the architecture and delivery space.
Fantastic. So obviously, yeah, I'm guessing you're quite busy at the moment. So obviously, when I reached out to you, this podcast, it very much is open to what you guys in the industry want to talk about. So going into talking about budgets in a recession. Firstly, what made you think of this topic, and what is it that sort of about sort of budgets and recession and how this impacts security? What made you think of this then?
So yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think it all comes down to sort of bringing a kind of a reflection of real life into the workplace, into what we're dealing with in security in particular. Security can be a bit esoteric and kind of sort of lofty concepts with kind of odd people talking at length about things that most people aren't really sort of interested in for the most part. But in terms of that, the current economic climate, we've got obviously a global recession going on at the minute in various parts of the world. A war in Europe again, and we're seeing the fallout from that in terms of high energy prices, high cost of living, and the fallout from that sort of naturally sort of bleeds its way into business. And there's certainly an expectation across the industry now that we're going to see some tightening of budgets as a response to that, because there's less disposable income going around. So there's less money that's going to be spent with entertainment products in particular. So we're kind of gearing up to kind of understand what that's likely to mean for us. And then when you kind of scale that back into the InfoSec world, InfoSec costs money. We're not a part of the business that's going to make money. So in the context of a recession, we need to be sort of very mindful of the fact that we are just a cost on the business, and we need to sort of keep an eye on how we're going to deliver value in that context. So a fair working assumption at this stage is that budgets are going to tighten somewhat, and in that context, the threats that we're dealing with, the security challenges that we face every single day, they're not going to go away. That's not going to get any easier for us. But there is always that potential that the budgets will be constrained somewhat. So that kind of brings us on to how are you practically looking to respond to that?
So let me play a bit of a dream scenario at the moment. Let's say I'm the CISO for Skybet. Let's just say, like, right, we're in a recession now, and I come to you Monday morning and I say, look, we're in a recession, Leigh. I need you now to send me a report as to how we can cut X amount of money, but still stay as secure and not jeopardise the security of our company. So obviously, before we delve into the nuts and bolts, what would be your strategic sort of overview if you had to say, like, okay, I'd do it in X, Y, and Z. That's how I'd cut costs. Just to give us a bit of a helicopter overview, what would be your thoughts?
So I'd look at that straight up as the capital expenditure is essentially what's being talked about first there. Whatever you might have planned to be spending in 23, 24, that's probably at risk now. So it effectively boils down to you're going to have to make the kit that you've got already do a little bit more. And there's a lot to unpack in kind of making that kit do more. There's a lot of options around there. And the second point is ultimately it kind of boils down to we're going to have to do more with less. It's not. I don't think the expectation is that there's going to be no investment across InfoSec for 23. That would be that'll be a sort of a catastrophic scenario, I think, for most people that we're realistically not facing. But it's going to be do more with less. Whatever your numbers were in your plans, they're probably going to be a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's sweating the kit that you've got a little bit more, getting that real value out of it, and planning to spend a little bit less on that capital bottom line.
Okay. So obviously, you mentioned to me before the pod, you said that the tech solves the generic problem and the people meet the niche requirements. What did you sort of mean by that? Could you go into a little bit more depth with that?
Yeah, so there's a whole load of amazing tech vendors out there, and you see year on year, the innovation that we see across the industry. We've had a kind of a long run of the AI ML kind of territory at the minute with everyone kind of with these what we kind of laugh about as silver bullet solutions that solve everything, and what they actually solve is a generic use case. So they solve, let's just pick one at random. They solve vulnerability management. But what does it actually mean to solve vulnerability management? A vulnerability management solution's good at what it does, but that's the generic use case. They have to sell a generic product for it to be saleable to dozens and dozens of companies.
Yeah.
The problems that my business faces, that individual businesses will face, are unique because we've got different legacies, different environments, different strategies, different threats, different challenges that we face, and that generic solution sort of fits over the top of that.
Yep.
But the detail of how you implement it, that's what I was talking about, that niche solution, and that's where you actually get the real value out of these solutions. As much of a silver bullet as they look like, it's the implementation level where you make it solve your problem. That's where the rubber hits the road, I think.
Right, so yeah, you're kind of saying it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. So I get what you're saying, and there might be some people, that's watching this going, oh, it's all well and good. Yourself saying that in Sky Bet, they're not short of a few quid here and there. What would your advice be to, more of the SME organisations who, didn't have much of a budget to begin with, but like, look, now we've got less, but we still need to be as secure as you guys. We still, we can't have breaches. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, and ultimately the answer is broadly the same around sort of lowering the investment expectations. It's around making what you've already invested in do more or do it better. But fundamentally, what it all comes down to, and if we kind of circle back to the very first question, is why did I pick the topic? It's about the people.
Yeah.
And this comes down to you've got almost certainly got within your teams a bunch of really talented security people, and it's not a case of sweating the resource. It's more giving that resource an opportunity to do their best work on your behalf. When the capital budgets are constrained, your people are still going to be there trying to solve these problems. And I think the answer to this kind of budgetary challenge is getting your people in the right place, getting them set up to succeed, and seeing how they kind of face off to that challenge.
Okay. So obviously, what we've kind of been speaking about, it very much is like, okay, when budgets are tight, let's look let's kind of like shut the doors, let's see what we've got, and let's really sort of get our sort of internal teams really maximising their potential on the human side. So when because obviously you manage a large team, you manage different team sizes throughout your career now, what would you kind of say, how do you try and get the best out of your team, and in another way, why wait until a recession to get the best out of these people? Why not all year round, 24/7, 365?
No, that's a great way of looking at it, and to be honest, I don't think there's necessarily going to be a great answer to why we as an industry don't tend to do that. Certainly we would argue, and I would genuinely argue that we do look after our people, and we do a lot on the people front. The protections and the support that Sky Bet and Flutter have put in place for our teams has been second to none. To be honest with you, shout about that all day long. We've had a great response to things like the COVID pandemic. So that's always been the sort of the backdrop to that. But I think the I think the uneasy truth is that where there is a budget available and there are silver bullets on the market, it's the easy choice. You know, it's I need a new toy to do a new thing, and then everything will be okay. And you know, the way the investment cycle tends to work is you get that money up front. You kind of you buy the new toy, you go through a project to implement that. And in my experience, in many companies, once that project has delivered and gone live and been signed off, the whole team that have worked to implement that move on to the next. And you've got a whole project team who, what are you going to do with them? Well, we're going to spend some more money on a new toy. And what everyone kind of forgets, or what it's easy to forget, is the people who have to now operate that existing control and that product that you've landed and get the value out of it. And so it's not that it's I suppose, a conscious passing over of people. It's just that, you know, there's money to be spent and there's real problems to be solved. And if you've got the money, why not spend it? And I guess it's flipping that focus to say, you know, actually get that implementation right, get that operationalization of that product right. You know, don't just kind of, you know, in kind of, I suppose, DevOps kind of language, don't throw it over the fence and say you're finished. It's not finished. You know, make sure you land it. And I think that's the kind of the difference. If that project team and its investment capital gets pared back or taken away, all you're left with is the focus on the people, and you know, that's where we can get, you know, sort of drive that increased value with it.
No, completely. Yeah, it's a great answer, and I suppose it's sort of like the sexy appeal of artificial intelligence and machine learning to be kind of. That's why every company wants to kind of like embrace that, don't they? It's like, oh yeah, we're an AI first company and this and that, but you do forget that the people behind that, that need to set that up, and like you say, it's the real skill is sort of setting up that, you know. And I suppose the more successful workforces are the ones that use sort of automation, but also have the people to be, you know, there behind the scenes and making sure that, you know, when it does hit the fan, i.e. if that's a recession, is it a pandemic, or if, you know, if the tech fails, then there's experts in the field that are ready to pick up the pieces, essentially.
That's right, yeah. And you know, my background initially in security, or where I did the most time in security, was in the architecture space. So I've put a lot of these new toys into companies and recommended new toys and gone through product assessments and the whole RFI, RFP kind of piece. So I've seen my fair share of the tech. And I remember in one previous company we put in across a global footprint quite a bleeding edge network detection solution, and it was good. You know, I'm not going to kind of not going to pull a punch on it. It was really good, and out the box it was AI ML based, and it was showing us things that we would never have seen in a million years on our network, just based on the existing tech that we had and the existing correlation of the data that was already there. So as an implementation, it was good implementation anyway. And you know, we saw you know, when we were experiencing sort of various cyber threats, we saw it come into its own, and you know, that was almost its coming of age, in that it was a new tech that was put in, and there was a little bit of cynicism around it. And you know, one day we were under an attack, and everyone was fresh out of ideas, and they kind of turned to me, having just put this in, and said, do you think this can help us out? And it absolutely did, and it showed it clear as day what was going on, and we solved it fairly quickly after that. So it was good tech. We landed it well. It was doing its job. But then where it kind of sort of took on a new gear, went to the next level, was when one of the analysts who was working in the security ops team at the time picked it up in that operational role, and said, you know, can you spend some time with me showing me what this does, you know, get me up to speed with it. So that was all part of the natural handover. That was really good. You know, showed him the ropes with it. And then for the next sort of days and weeks, he kind of dedicated his time to going through each of the alerts with a fine-tooth comb and tuning them specifically to the nuance of our environment. And like I say, it switched gear for it. You know, all of a sudden, you know, the noise that was in the background was tuning out much faster. and what it was raising was, you know, we should be spending time addressing these are the real things that we're addressing.
Yeah.
So, you know, that kind of shows both ends of it, really. You know, the tech can work, but when you put somebody with a good mind and the time and the dedication to throw at it, you know, you really get the results out of the tech. And it's that sweat in the tech with good people that I think is where we're going to, you know, where 23 sort of shows the direction of travel, really.
Right, okay. And obviously that's an example of, you know, making, you know, when tech and highly skilled professionals work hand in hand. Has there, and I am putting you on the spot here, has there ever been a time when, you know, like you say, you've done a lot of time in architecture, where you've embedded a new tooling, you've embedded a new tech stack, it's not worked, and you have needed to call upon, you know, a professional to kind of say like, whoa, that hasn't worked, we need to bring you in to kind of basically disaster recover it, like say like, actually it's not worked, this one, can you get us back to a level playing field?
Yeah, it is a kind of disaster recovery, isn't it? It's yeah. I've, again, naming no names.
Yeah.
I've worked in a lot of places. We were involved in a project that was putting in a new operational tool, and it was kind of part of a broader InfoSec investment. There was quite chunky money being thrown at this, and there were probably a dozen or more projects in this portfolio of work, and it was all very very sort of project driven, you know, turning it around onto the next thing. And one of the tools was, you know, we had an existing operational tool, but as part of some other decisions in some other parts of that portfolio, we could essentially get a tool for free as a part of a purchase of another package. And so, well, we could just replace the existing one and save some money. So from an accountancy point of view, from a, you know, a finance and from a project point of view, you know, win-win. Who could be upset about that? And this project proceeded on that basis, and they landed these other tools and they replaced this existing one. But at no point in that process did anybody stop to talk to the manager that ran that team that said, you know, your identity solution, as it happens, it's going to be turned off on Friday, and on Monday when you come in, you've got a brand new tool. And there was a certain amount of surprise when the manager didn't welcome them with open arms and thank them for all the investment that they'd brought, because it was, I've got a team that needs to run this, and this is the first I'm hearing of it. And you know, it was in fairness quite a big oversight on behalf of the project that it had gotten sort of that carried away with itself. But you know, these are the kind of the pitfalls of kind of very capital heavy projects, sort of delivering, like I said, toys rather than necessarily solutions.
Yeah, and I'm trying to obviously put a positive spin on it now. So when do you sort of see this as creating opportunities for solving the problem with people when budgets sort of do come available then? So obviously, you know, all these, you know, heroes in the making that can help you out in 2023 should we go into recession, or, you know, because I know that we're kind of on the brink of it, if not we're kind of in a little one. All these, you know, people that went into it but then come out of it as like, you know, we've really helped out the company. What opportunities can this give to them? So
yeah, this is certainly from my point of view. I'm very heavily focused on the people side of things, because you know, like we talked about, I've got a lot of teams and quite large teams and some excellent people in there. And what this does is really, as we potentially take away that capital focus on what we're doing, throwing the money at the problem, this really opens up that door for careers to be made. You know, this is, you have a, I'm not going to embarrass the guy at the minute. We've got a current project that's going on, and we've had a couple of teething issues as we've gone through it. But you know, one guy in particular has been front and center on solving this all the way through. You know, he's been putting the extra hours in an evening. You know, no one's forcing him to do this. He just wants this turned around. And you know, he's been getting familiar with these new products and got troubleshooting the problems, and he's driving it. You know, he's very much front and center in all of this. And it's in those examples I like to think careers are made. You know, he won't be the techie on that product for very long. You know, he's built himself that career as, I solve problems, and,
Yeah.
and I took a sticky situation that we were in, and ultimately, touch wood, he's turned it around.
Yeah, yeah.
We as the project team have turned that around,
Yeah.
and it's great to see that he's been doing it for a few years now, but that kind of career trajectory starts to take off for him, and
Yep.
you get your name built and known through these kind of tough situations.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
that's the kind of thing that's really nice to see in certain sort of medium and large sort of organisations where people can kind of almost fade into the background sometimes if you don't really look at what's going on. But when you kind of you take a minute to stop and see the individual effort that some people are really throwing at these things, and you kind of go, they're the people we need to be looking after.
We've obviously mentioned quite a lot about the value of upskilling the teams and the people currently in the company. Obviously, in your case, Skybet. To move away from a little bit of upskilling teams, is there any more strategic sort of points that you can offer in terms of the cost cutting measures that you can potentially offer as well?
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle on it to kind of look at as how you respond strategically to this rather than just kind of taking the kind of the tactical hit, I suppose. And one of my sort of personal bugbears with sort of tech investments in the past has always been the technical debt that we leave behind. So we come off one system in favour of the new toy that we're putting in place, but then there's always a reason, sometimes a good reason, sometimes not, to kind of we'll just leave that in place just in case, or there's a use case or two that needs to still hang off that. And as a business, you accrue this huge estate of technical debt it's costing you money, and it's almost hidden costs because it's no one really factors in the ongoing running of how much all this kit costs to kind of sit there, and then the complexity that still exists that means that there's multiple engineers, there's multiple devs working in multiple different ways on solving the same problem. So it kind of opens up an opportunity to reduce some tech debt and to bring in some rationalization really of the estate that we're ultimately responsible for looking after. And from a security point of view, I guess that's why it's one of my bugbears. This is old kit that's not going to be properly maintained, if we're honest, and it's just going to sit there and just become a bigger and bigger target that's going to undermine a lot of the other work that you're doing at the minute. And it's a particularly pertinent one for us at the minute at Flutter UK and Ireland. So Flutter UK and Ireland is comprised of Sky Betting and Gaming, where I was originally employed, but it's also Paddy Power and it's also Betfair. We've also got Tombola brand that's recently come on board too. And as you can imagine, bringing together 4 independently successful businesses, everyone's got their own tech stack, everyone's got their own data centers, everyone's got their own ways of working. And how do you rationalize that down? That's a huge problem, and that's one of the big investments that we're putting together this year over the next sort of 12 to 18 months in Flutter UK and Ireland is how do we move towards a common platform? How do we look at getting everybody on a rationalized tech stack that works in the same way for everybody? And then crucially, from my point of view, how do we get rid of that tech debt? How do we bring that under control? And these are the, like I say, hidden cost savings that are potentially there for everybody to take a look at, that are just easily missed in a normal cycle of project implementations with a big capital budget.
Obviously, when you've got to sort of shut up shop, when there is a recession, you've got to sort of look in house. Does the dark side of security, everyone trying to get into it, does that still remain as prevalent whilst in a recession? Is the outside world still as active trying to get in, or does that slow down in comparison to the world slowing down as well?
Yeah, so there's an ever-changing threat landscape, as a lot of your listeners will be aware of, and we've got dedicated teams looking at that who are kind of feeding us that intel, and the budgetary constraints that an above the board organisation might face as a result of kind of global pressures aren't going to be felt by let's call them criminal organisations, people who are looking to kind of break into networks for monetary gain or nefarious reasons. And in fact, I think what you likely see is an uptick in the opportunists who are, there's a lot of neat tools out there that they need a little bit of insight to, but even some of the tools in the vanilla form pointed at a badly configured server is going to get you something, and you only need a single way in, and then you can potentially sort of burrow from there. So I think it's ever evolving as a threat landscape. I think that they're not going to be subject to the same sort of global conditions that the rest of us necessarily are, and we need to keep a very close eye on how that evolves, really.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And yeah, just like that, obviously, we've come up to sort of the end of our time. So last question, like if you can sort of surmise as a final sort of overview, if somebody doesn't have time to watch the full pod, and they need just a couple of quick pointers, they're the head of an organisation, they need some cost cutting tips for their cybersecurity teams heading into a recession, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, so my top line answer is going to be your people are your asset here. In constrained times where capital investment is likely to be reduced, focus on the people. The people in your organisation are your secret sauce. They know the challenge. They know your environment. They know the challenges you're facing. They know where the bodies are buried in the environment. So, this is the time to start to rely on the people more. As that focus moves away from the new toys, that means sweating the assets that you currently have. A lot of the products do much more than they necessarily advertise as their primary selling point. Take a look at those things.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, making what you have do more, and doing more with less. The rationalization piece. And then again, I guess just to underscore the last point on that is rationalizing away some of that tech debt that I think we all know is there, but haven't necessarily taken the opportunity to clean up.
Perfect. So, yeah, and just like that, we've run out of time. So thank you so much, Leigh, for jumping on the security space. It's been a pleasure. If anybody wants any of Leigh's details, it'll all be in the details for this pod. If anybody has any questions for Leigh as well, I will link all his socials so that you can ask him any questions that you may like. And thanks so much for watching.
Thank you very much.